And friends, welcome. Stephen Fetter here from United in Learning, and it is a delight and a privilege to be here in the meeting with you. I'm mostly in the background. Trina is the one who's chairing this meeting, so I am simply going to turn things over to her and get out of the way. Trina, welcome. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Stephen, and welcome to everybody here. I always love to watch people arrive at these gatherings and to see um, the church coming together. Can you imagine that our ancestors in the faith could ever have imagined in 1925 that in 2025 we would be gathering like this from all across the country on Zoom? I think it would probably just blow their minds if they were told that in the moment. Um, as we come together, we're going to begin our time with a land acknowledgement, and I've invited Tony Snow, who is the Indigenous Minister for Chinook Winds region, to offer an opening for us and an acknowledgement of the land.
Thank you. If I could get a co-hosting ability, I just want to share a couple of screens here. Great, thank you.
Sorry, I had my mic closed. Yes, go ahead, Tony. Sorry about that.
Thank you. So just wanted to share a little bit here for a couple of minutes. An acknowledgement of land and what does this mean? So I just want to offer a couple of thoughts for people. Here we have Mount Yamnuthka, which is the holy sacred mountain, the place where God sits in the land of the Stoney Nakoda people in Minithni, what we call Alberta. This is Lake Minnewanka. Minnewanka, outside of Banff, is a sacred lake, a holy lake, place of vision quest. Ozata Imni in the Kananaskis Lakes area, the lower and upper Kananaskis Lakes. These are both places of discernment, places of developing ourselves and our understanding. Yahatinda is a sacred place for vision quests. There's been very many stories in our tradition about that. Minneruin is the Caven Basin, Canada's first national park, which was a area that was identified and had been used for millennia for the indigenous people from the Stoney Nakoda. And when these places were discovered, when these places were identified, they were often made into places that were restricted. So we cannot go back to these places, cannot go back and freely worship in our sacred areas. It's like not being able to go back to your church. So when we speak of acknowledgements of land and territories once inhabited by indigenous people, sometimes we think of their disconnection, their removal or exclusion from places they grew up, places their parents and ancestors remember. Sometimes there is no memory at all if they have been subjected to trauma or indoctrination. These cases are history of coercion, manipulation, and assimilation is quite clear, as is the path of atonement and reconciliation. In this season of Lent, we think of Christ driven into the wilderness to undergo a time of physical and mental trials. He was driven into a foreboding, desolate place, unwelcome and hostile to his presence. To indigenous people, we would feel welcomed back into creation, a place of deep connection and belonging, a place where we come from. We would know the land and the land would know us. We would turn, as we always have, to nature to seek direction, not hostility, because we bring no hostile intent. In our vision quests, we listen to the winds, the rocks, the animals, the birds, and they would tell us their story, connecting us to the grand narrative of God's creation, where our story resides. Part of the great mystery of our existence and the creators. In these words, we remember that there are spaces that we acknowledge and understand that Indigenous people have connected to, that Indigenous people have history with, and have ceremonies for. in these sacred places, in these holy spaces. Remember that we are standing in someone else's holy land. And take mindful regard when we speak our land acknowledgements to know our part in that story and our part to undo some of the injustices that we live with. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for being with us and offering that profound acknowledgement. So, friends, we come together today from many places, across different time zones and provinces, maybe even some territories and watersheds. We come from different contexts that are rural and urban, large and small, thriving and struggling, and yet we are here, united in spirit, in call, and in care. Our time today is about connection. It's about listening and learning, about holding space for both the reality of our time and the hope we carry for the future. We meet at a time when the world continues to shift around us. And while the road is not always clear, we come together grounded in trust, in God, in one another, and in the hope that continues to rise among us. This time is being offered by the leadership of our church as a gift to us, a chance to listen deeply, to speak honestly, and to remember that we are not alone in this journey. So let us begin our time together with a prayer. Loving and faithful God, you have called us together today from different corners, different ministries, different lives. And yet here we are, one people in your spirit. Thank you for the gift of connection, for the chance to hear each other, to learn from one another, and to be reminded that your church is alive and moving. In a world that often feels hurried and divided, help us to be present, to bring our full hearts to this time, and to root ourselves in your enduring love. Renew in us a sense of purpose, refresh our hope, remind us that even now you are doing a new thing in our midst. We pray this in the name of Christ, our companion and guide. Amen. And reading from Psalm 136, taken from Everyday Psalms, which is a book written by Jim Taylor. At the beginning of the beginning, God loved. At the end of the end, God will still be loving. God's love lasts forever. Many gods are worshipped every day in temples of commerce and conflict, but God's love lasts forever. Other gods will come into favor and fade away. They will fall in and out of fashion, but God's love lasts forever. Systems and authorities grow and fade. They have their own devotees and disciples, but God's love lasts forever. Other gods claim to manage the sea and sky, the earth and its fullness. Only God can claim to have created them. Science says that even the sun is not eternal. It will consume the solar system in a shell of fire. But God's love lasts forever. Other gods favor the rich and powerful. They ignore those who don't know the right buttons to push. But God watches over the forgotten creatures. No refugee or fruit fly is overlooked. God's love lasts forever. God is one with those who suffer. God is one with all creation. God's love lasts forever. At the beginning of the beginning, God loved. At the end of the end, God will still be loving. And I'm going to invite us to hear the Lord's Prayer in a new way. It's a recording of the congregation that I worship, Highlands United, which has music director Jordy Roberts has written a new version of the Lord's Prayer that I want to share with you today. Thank you. So now let us move from a time of worship into a time of our work together. So this is an opportunity for you to hear about the work of the wider church through the General Council Executive. So during this time, we're going to keep our mics off and invite you, if you have questions, to put those questions in the chat, and we'll give you an opportunity. We'll give the speakers an opportunity to respond to that. We have about an hour and a half, and in that time, we'll deal with as many questions as we can. But if anything is left unanswered, we'll address those in the forum after the event. And there is a link posted in the chat that has the summary of March's General Council Executive Meeting for your reference. So first, we're going to introduce our guest speakers today. So Stephen, if you wouldn't mind spotlighting those folks, and we will introduce them as they come on the screen here. Paul, welcome. So Paul, can I invite you to introduce yourself and answer the question, what has been one highlight on your term on the General Council Executive?
Hi, I'm Paul Walfall. I am minister at Pilgrim United Church in Edmonton in the Northern Spirit Regional Council. I am completing 7 years of service on the General Council Executive. One highlight, Trina, that's hard.
There's
It
lots
has
of
been,
highlights.
there's a lot of highlights. I think the major highlight for me has been just getting to know the church at a different level.
Great,
That's my
thank you.
highlight.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. Samuel.
Good
Can
evening,
you answer
everybody.
this? Can you answer the same question? What is one highlight for your time on executive?
Well, just like Paul, it's difficult for me. By the way, my name is Samuel Vauverdan Soho. I'm a parish minister in Sherbrooke, Quebec. Well, let me say that the main for me is the working and the adoption of the 7 justice-based principles. If you wanted just one, that's the one for me.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. And Catherine, can you introduce yourself and answer the question, what is one highlight of your time on the General Council Executive?
Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Glover. I live in London, Ontario, and I'm in my first term on the executive. It's been a privilege to be part of the important work of our national church and realizing the call and vision of our national church is very powerful work. It's been a privilege for me. I chaired the task team to review the roles of moderator and general secretary these past 2 years, and that's been a real highlight for me. Thank you.
Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. I think we have M.
I'm here.
Okay, well, you
get
can
started.
talk while Stephen finds you, M.
Perfect. I'm M. I live in Treaty 1 territory, also known as Winnipeg. It was snowing here this morning, which was fun. I'm a lay member of the GCE, and I'm in just finishing my first term. Um, my highlight would probably be I had the honor of being able to be on the Moderators Advisory Committee, and I really enjoyed that, getting to know the role of the moderator more closely and helping the moderator on her journey through the last 3 years. So that's my highlight.
Thank you, M. And Catherine, one of our newer members to the General Council Executive. You might have to search harder to find your one highlight.
I'm the other Catherine. I'm in ministry in Brecon United Church in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. And I was finishing up a term that was somebody had to step down from the General Council executive. So the highlight was being welcomed into the space and just seeing the care and just deep faithfulness of the people who have been called to do this work, working together.
Thank you, Catherine. I think Michael Cavaney is there.
Hi, yes. I guess Michael Cavaney, I am the lead minister at Kamloops United Church, and I've served 1 term on the GCE and looking forward to the second term. I also serve on the Finance Advisory Committee. And between the Finance Advisory Committee and the GCE, the thing that's really struck me is just how dedicated everybody is. It really, for me, has just been a highlight to work with such a wonderful group of people who really have the church in their hearts. And I've been inspired in my own ministry by working with the people on the GCE and the Finance Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Michael Blair, do you want to introduce yourself? You're going to speak later, but maybe you can say what a highlight is for you.
So Michael Blair, General Secretary. Just the fun of trying to work with these colleagues in moving forward the strategic objectives. So It's been fun trying to have us all row in the same direction.
Thank you, Michael. And David.
Thank you very much. I'm David Leighton Brown. I'm a lay member of the General Council Executive. I live in Richmond Hill, Ontario, and go to the imaginatively named Richmond Hill United Church. Uh, like Catherine, but a little more gray-haired than her, I too came in to fill an uncompleted term, so I have not been on the GCE for a full 3 years. I serve on the governance committee, and I feel, I hope other people feel, that it really suits my particular skills and abilities very well. But the highlight for me has probably been seeing the growth and development of the Vision 2035, which hasn't fully rolled out to the full church yet, but I hope you all view it with the same excitement that I have seen it in the early stages.
Thank you. Do we have, okay. So I understand Kit is sick, but Kit was going to give a bit of an overview of the work of the General Council and the General Council executives. So is somebody able to do that for us?
Paul was going to do that, I think.
Okay, Paul, are you able just to give us a bit of an overview of the work of the General Council and the General Council executive?
Yes. The General Council of the United Church of Canada, formerly called the Denominational Council, is that body in the church that takes on the responsibility of denominational wide shaping issues and policies for the whole church. As we would all know, the United Church of Canada has a three council model, and each council has a different responsibility, from the congregational or community of faith level right up to regional council and then denominational council or general council. The general council meets annually, but every 3 years it meets in person, and this year the meeting will be in Calgary. Um, in between the meetings of the general council, the executive acts on behalf of the general council for those issues that have been referred to it or those things that were not dealt with at the triennial meeting of the general council, or those issues that have come up that now need policy directive to take over. The General Council Executive tries not to micromanage the church, recognizing that each level has its responsibility. And in fact, if we have enough on our hands to take us for the rest of our lives to get done, there's some statutory things that the General Council Executive is responsible for, such as the pensions for ministers, and in those cases, therefore, the General Council Executive must act with, as in all things, with due diligence and care for the whole church. Since 2019, the General Council Executive, as you know, is constituted not from representatives from the various parts of the church, but all members, I think all 18 or 17 members, represent the whole church. And so we have the responsibility when we sit to meet to look at the church as a whole and the issues that come to us for decision, and not necessarily from a from individual stakeholders' perspective. The last meeting of the current General Council Executive, I think we are called GCE 44, was held in March. That's also one of the things that has changed since 2019, that more use has been made of the online meetings, and the General Council Executive meets basically once a year face to face, but other times it will meet online. At the close, at the at some point during General Council 45, when the new General Council executive is constituted, some of our members will be stepping down as our term has ended, and this includes Reverend Samuel Donsoko, Reverend Alice Scheibert, myself, Jane MacDonald, the very Reverend um, Richard Bott, and he'll be replaced by the current moderator because he was there as the former moderator, Reverend Anderson, Reverend Teresa Bernard Cole, and Reverend Catherine Burton. I wanted to make a point of those of us who are stepping down, and I'd include Catherine in this because we were called upon to spend an extra year on the General Council Executive because of the pandemic. So we had to be holding the church during the time of the pandemic. This job has no, there are no perks, there's no award given for you, but I want the church to recognize that during the time of pandemic, um, some of us stepped forward and held the church during that time. And now, thank goodness, we're stepping back.
Thank you,
7
Paul.
years is a long time to be
Indeed,
on
it
the
is.
General
We're
Council
great.
Executive.
We're grateful for your service. We have one additional member of the executive who's popped on. So Arliss, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself and to say one highlight for you of your time on the General Council Executive.
Thank you, Trina. My apologies. I had to be in Ottawa today and I was driving back and the snowstorm was right behind me. So I just feel really thankful that I got here. Arliss Skibout, I'm retired, ordained, live in Eastern Ontario, outside of Ottawa, close to Perth. I think the highlight, there are just lots of highlights. And as Paul mentioned, we've been doing this for 7 years, which is really a long time. It was very varied. And David mentioned the, to 2035. I see it really as a progressive time that we broke ground as a new iteration of General Council Executive, and in fact, the whole governance model. And then the strategy, bold, daring, all the way to, to where we are now. So I think the highlight is that we made progress all of the time in the hard issues, that we didn't shy away from taking risks of moving ourselves and the church forward, and being in constant conversation with how governance is different now. So I'm very thankful for the time, for getting to know people from across the church again, to know regional, in just the gifts and the skills that everyone brought to their the various committees that they sat on. So
thank you, Arliss. Paul kind of stole my thunder a little bit. It is true that these folks and the rest of the General Council Executive have given a tremendous gift to the church. They have given of their time and of their talents, and they do that off the corner of their desk. They do that to serve the church because they love the church, and because we are all the church. We're all the church together. And so it's not them, the General Council, because the General Council is us. And these are the people that have stepped forward on our behalf to do this work for us. And so I just take a moment to be grateful for that. And if you feel like it, you can use your reaction button to show an expression of appreciation for those folks and the work that they've been doing, because it is a lot of time and energy, and we're very, very lucky and well served by all these folks. So thank you all for the work that you do. And we're so excited that you're here today to share some of the details of that work. And I'm going to ask Michael if you could just talk a little bit about the work of the General Council Executive, and in particular, some of the things from the most recent meeting. And if folks have questions, feel free just to put them in the chat, and we'll collect them up and respond to them later on when we have time. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Trina, and good evening, folks. Just want to do a bit of a quick overview of some of the items that the executive dealt with more recently. One of the, I think, commitment and work of the General Council Executive is holding the tension of the question of what is good for the whole church. And so often the executive struggles between what may be of individual interest, but at the end, what is good for the whole church, and to keep the perspective of the whole in mind as we make decisions. One of the questions that the executive ask itself is, what is the big question? So as issues come to the fore that they have to deal with, question of what is the big question that needs to be addressed in this. And so this most recent executive, we try to do things a little bit differently. There's, as I think has been indicated, we have been in some ways on a bit of a learning curve. And so at this recent executive meeting, the executive tried to live into the methodology that is going to be recommended for the General Council in August, which is an opportunity to do some learning and have some discussion about proposals that are coming forward, and then having some time to discern and then to make decisions afterwards. So it was a significant learning time for us as an executive as we try to do this. Lori Han has put into the chat, if you have not seen it yet, the summary of the work of the most recent executive, but I want to highlight a few things out of that which may spark some conversations. Some of the conversations is conversations to be had at the General Council. So there are a number of pieces that the executive dealt with, which are pieces to be moved forward to the General Council. The executive had established two working groups over the course of this past triennium, a working group that to look at the role of the moderator and the general secretary. So every 10 years, according to the manual, the executive is tasked with reviewing the role of the moderator. And this time around, the executive chose to add a review of the role of the general secretary as well. So the task group has reported, and there are some recommendations that the task group has put forward that will go to General Council. So that was a significant piece of work that happened this triennium, and a piece of work that the executive wrestled with as it moved the recommendations forward to the General Council. Another piece of work that the executive done, and this was a direction from General Council 44, was the establishment of what's called a total compensation task group. That task group did a significant amount of work in dealing with data and looking particularly at the questions about are there inequities in the way in which ministry personnel is paid. And in many ways, the data indicated that the sense that many particularly minoritized ministry personnel were being paid at minimum salary didn't quite show up in the data. So in fact, that majority of our ministers are paid above minimum. And so that was an interesting piece of the data. There are a number of recommendations in that proposal that will go to the General Council with regards to how ministry personnel are compensated. And it has also identified a number of pieces of work that need some ongoing research and to bring recommendations back at a later time. Another significant piece that the executive dealt with, which has moved forward to the General Council, is that in 2015, the General Council, as it dealt with the restructuring of the church, passed a motion that up to 10% of mission and service should be set aside for new and emerging and renewing ministries. We began to do some work on that coming out of the 2015 General Council. Up until 2020, I think it is, we only reached about 4% of M&S going to initiatives. And because of the work we've been doing this year, particularly around the strategic plan and the growth initiative, and the importance that the executive has said that growth is a priority for the life of the church, the executive is making a recommendation to the General Council that we reinstitute that commitment of up to 10% of mission and service to go towards new and renewing and ministry. So those are three proposals that the executive dealt with. That is going on to General Council for some decision making. Locally, or within the context of the executive's ability this year, we have the executive approved designating Orange Shirt Sunday. And so you will see resources rolled out across the church with regards to that. You've heard some conversation about Vision 2035. And this is as the staff in the General Council office and in the Regional Council executive ministers and the executive have kind of thought about what's next as we try to address some of the urgent needs in the church as a whole and try to ensure that the United Church of Canada does have a place for the future. And so one of the decisions that was made was the sale of a property in Edmonton, and that the sale of that property would go towards funding activities around moving forward Vision 2035. You will, over the next little while, be hearing more details about Vision 2035, but it's a coming together, a denominational-wide strategy to ensure how we live into the call of being disciples in this particular time and address the challenges of the decline that is happening in the church and try to identify the preferred future for the life of the church going forward. If you look at the document, there are a number of other decisions that were made, but I think for me, those are some of the highlights that I wanted to lift up for you tonight. Back to you, Trina.
Thank you, Michael. That's a lot. And as you can see, the executive has been wrestling with and tackling a lot of big issues for our time. So we're really wanting to open things up to questions. So if you have some questions, can you please type them in the chat? And I just want to highlight a comment from Lynn Mackey, who's expressing appreciation for the more fulsome reporting on the work of the General Counsel Executive, and she's encouraging you to continue this practice of sharing this information. And I know that this is an expression of a commitment to transparency around decision making and governance that you have personally. So really appreciate that. So while people are thinking of their questions, I wonder if you made a comment about the executive is wrestling with their big questions, and that's the work of governors. As we know, part of the work of governance is to think about what are the issues facing the church right now, and how can we plan for sort of 5 or 10 years into the future? And that's the sort of crux of what governance is. Can you talk a little bit about what the executive has identified as the big questions before us right now?
And I'll start, and I'll invite others in the executive to address that. I think the significant question is the urgency of the decline and the impact of the decline in the life of the church. So one of the pieces that has come out of the strategic objective plan that the executive approved for the work of the General Counsel Office was an establishment of a more robust data collecting system. And so, in many ways, we are at a place now where we are able to make decisions based on data, not just stuff we hear, but we can actually look at data. So one of the big questions is around how it is that we intervene in the challenge of the decline in the life of the church, and understanding that the ethos of the United Church is certainly something we want to preserve within the Canadian landscape. So I think that is one piece. A second piece is the recognition of how it is that we invest and support leadership in the life of the church. We recognize ministry personnel. Many of our ministry personnel are tired, are exhausted, are challenged by the changing landscape. And so the need to ensure that we are supporting, but also building the capacity of leadership for the life of the church going into the future. And I think a third piece is the change in landscape of the Canadian society. And so how it is that we as a United Church engage with the society that it is changing. And I think fourthly, the question of what does it mean to be the United Church today? And having a future perspective. So those are some of the big pieces I think that have been identified, and I certainly invite others on the executive to chime in.
Thanks. So if there's other executive ministers who have a thought to share, can you just raise your hand, and then Stephen can spotlight you. Don't be shy. Otherwise, I'm going to start calling you out. So, Samuel.
Well, before you call me out, let me just agree with Michael, the General Secretary. I think one other big piece is our relationship with the Indigenous Church, the remit past. Now we all know, and we are praying actively toward its goal and its implementation, which is not easy, but we are all hopeful that we will reach a state of right relationship with the indigenous church and our siblings. It's an issue, a matter of justice. That's why when you invited me to say what I liked, those 7 justice-based principles, I think, will be helpful in that it will enable us not only in our relationship with the indigenous church, but in general in issues of justice. And I think if we consider what is happening in the world and in our country, we cannot downplay the issue of justice. And if we want to be those deep, spiritualized and spiritual, daring disciple of Jesus, that will be very helpful. So the relationship with the indigenous church, that's an essential part of our justice ministry, is something that is important for me with the passing of the remit. And now the constitution of an independent, autonomous, indigenous church.
Thank you, Samuel. Any of the other members? David.
I only want to add to what Michael said. I think he covered things really well, and Samuel made a really important point also. But in our self-introductions, there were several references to the governance of the United Church. And one of the things, the big questions that the GCE has been grappling with and will continue to grapple with, because it's not a quick fix, is to determine how to actually spend our time and make decisions about big issues rather than small technical ones. I'm sure everyone has heard of Parkinson's law. Parkinson actually composed several laws, and one of his lesser known laws is that in any decision-making body, the amount of time spent on an issue is inversely related to the importance of the issue. We will endlessly debate, the source of coffee that we will serve at the break, and we will deal with major earth-shaking issues instantly. We in GCE, but we at every level of the church need to develop governance practices to focus our attention on big questions rather than small ones.
Thank you, David. I think that's the big challenge of any governance group is to really stay focused on what's important and not just the things that that we think are most important, but the things that are most important to the church as a whole. So thanks for raising that. Arliss, was that you saying you wanted to speak or just waving your hand? Okay. So we do have a question here. So can you say how you are identifying the thriving ministries across the country? And it says, I ask this as part of a thriving rural ministry. So I think that's referencing the Toward 2035 work. And so who wants to respond to that?
Can take a stab. And so I think we're in process of having the conversation about what we understand about vibrant, relevant, thriving. All those words are words that have meanings in different contexts. And so part of the work we are wanting to do towards 2035 is to define some of those words. So in terms of what we understand them to be. And certainly the growth animators um, are in their work with regions and working with individual communities of faith are gathering the kind of markers. So those of you who are probably familiar with the language of the marks of the church, I think in some ways, one of the things we want to be able to do is to identify what are the marks of those thriving communities. So we're in process of having conversation and discerning, and as we begin to work through and live into Vision 2035, we'll be able to communicate some of that, but that's work that's being done at the moment.
Thank you. Any of the other executive members? Paul?
One of the things we were constantly wrestling with, especially in the last 4 years, was the question of sustainability. How sustainable our communities of faith? And I think having proper data has helped us to try to scratch the surface of what that is. As Michael said, I don't think we are fully the number of matrices that you will need to put together can't be only quantitative. So we at the heart of it is not just vibrant or those glowing words, but at the heart of it is just the question of sustainable. And what it is to be sustainable going into the future, especially given the shocks that happen because of COVID, and even now with the shocks that are happening because of tariff and all of that type of stuff. So it is to keep our hands on that pulse and to know what is the future that we desire to have. It doesn't mean, and I think we need to be clear, it doesn't mean that we somehow believe that the church will survive in the way it is right now. Some changes will have to occur. But it seems to be that we are saying, okay, if we are to survive, this is what we will need to be doing.
Thank you, Paul. I think that part of the conversation that I've heard at General Council, certainly in the staff leaders group, is about how the community of faith is the unit of ministry. That's how ministry happens in the United Church of Canada. It's central. The community of faith is central, and so I know that that's at the heart of all the decisions that the General Council executive make. Another question, when can we hope to hear more about the Vision 2035 across the church?
So that's a good question. And probably in a week or so, there will be some information that will be sent to communities of faith just to identify what is in that. At General Council, we will begin a conversation around this, and in the fall, we're inviting the church as a whole. We were putting some resources together, and we were inviting the church as a whole into some conversation around this, so that I think as the staffing group and the executive has given marching orders to staff that this needs to be a priority, and it is about how we intervene and how we understand what it means for us to be disciples, what it means. Paul will be happy with this, that some of the work is being done. We're reviving the language of connectionalism. So, Paul, you'll be happy all the times you have said that in the General Council Executive. It will show up as part of this work, but it's how it is that we're connected together as the United Church of Canada across the country, seeking to live into our understanding of our faith. And so we will, some regional councils will have a bit of a discussion about that going into General Council. At General Council, there'll be a context for some conversation, and then in the fall, we will roll out some resources to invite the church as a whole into some conversation about this.
Thanks. Another question, just if you want to share anything about the upcoming centennial and what is happening nationally. I know I've had some questions in my region about what's the official thing, and so just maybe you can just highlight a bit about what we're doing there.
So the official thing is a celebration in Newfoundland on June the 8th. So at Gower Street United Church in Newfoundland, we will gather for a national service, a celebration and commemoration of our centennial. The Reverend Dr. Professor Jerry Pillay, who is the General Secretary of the World Council of Churches, will be the preacher for that event, and we will have ecumenical partners who are part of that. We've also, as you know, invited across the church for folks to identify all the ways in which they want to or will be celebrating or acknowledging the centennial. So there's a number of events that are planned in different parts, local congregations, there are clustering of groups. So part of what the plan was not to do where the national church was organizing stuff all across the country, but was to invite churches, regional councils, clustering of communities to acknowledge a celebration and then to share that information. So there's a website. On the website, there's an opportunity for folks to identify how it is that they are engaging in the centennial. We wanted it to be local as well as the one national event. And if you remember last June, we kind of began the year of celebration with a service in Toronto at Metropolitan United Church, the site of the first General Council. Newfoundland is we're acknowledging the fact that the Methodists and Presbyterians in Newfoundland came into union before they joined Canada. So just to kind of span our history. Folks are welcome if they want to come to Newfoundland. There's to be part of that national celebration. The service from Newfoundland will be live streamed, so folks can participate, do watch parties, and feel part of that event in coming out of St. John. So those are some of the opportunities to engage the centennial.
Great, thanks. And isn't it just a great opportunity to celebrate this United Church of ours? So shifting gears a little, so a question just around going back to the big questions and wondering about the impact of the situation in the world, particularly in Palestine, and the threat to life that we're experiencing throughout the world now, and it says it's a big issue from a gospel perspective. Has this not seized the General Council Executive? So how are we engaging with the challenges of the world? So, Michael, you've had to be on the hot seat a lot. Let's get some of the General Council executive members to respond here. Okay, and who wants to go first? Paul, do you want to speak?
I can say many things here. One, I would want to assure people that I think at every General Council executive meeting in the last 4 years, the issue of Palestine and what is happening there has been an agenda item and has been discussed at length and passionately. Every letter sent to us as executive members from persons who were very concerned about the issue has, I know myself and my colleagues, we have read all letters, and these have helped us in our fashioning of the decisions and the discussions that we have had. I know coming out of one executive meeting, I think a year ago, there was a letter that was sent to the Prime Minister, and we were so passionate about it that we agreed that every member of the General Council executive's name would be attached to this letter. The principles to guide response of the church, I think, has partly come out of the Palestine thing as well, in order to have a swift and thoughtful and thorough response from the church. By going by these principles, therefore, we don't necessarily have to gather for a meeting to discuss the same issue all over again. Once we're abiding by the principles, we're able therefore to say, okay, this is what we will do as our response. And I'm thankful for those principles as to guide us. And I would urge the whole church, regional councils and communities of faith to look at those principles and see how they can guide your work as well. So yes, it has been a big issue, a very big issue, quite a lot of time. And this is where I don't think Parkinson's theory is applicable here, because the amount of time is directly proportional to the seriousness of the issue. But I think also we need to recognize in the process that as we are very concerned about this, and as we lend our voices to the issues by writing letter to the Prime Minister and keeping the matter on the front burn, as we would put it, back home, that this is where the voice of the church, the prophetic voice and pastoral voice of the church, is constantly being challenged in the wider society. But although challenged, we persist. For what we know in that case is a matter of life and death. And in other areas where it is clear that the innate, my words are failing me here, the innate value of human life and the dignity of human life is called into question. We have sought to respond to it on behalf of you and on our own behalf as on behalf of the United Church of Canada. And certainly, what people may not know is that certainly if we as individual executive members aren't seeing something, Michael gets a couple other emails from us, and so does Carmen, a couple other emails from us to say, okay, what we need to be saying something here. So quite a lot is going on these issues, and I want the church to bear that in mind. And I have no doubt that the new executive will continue to hold this up as a point of responsibility.
Thank you, Paul. And Catherine Glover.
Thank you, Trina. At every executive meeting, we hear a report and we deliberate on the report from our ecumenical partners, and we reflect and make decisions on the role of the United Church in the world, on multiple justice issues and human rights issues in the world. And we also reflect on the mission and service rollout in the world. And these are important considerations. We know these things are important to local congregations who are dedicated to the Mission and Service Fund of the United Church of Canada. So that's a very important part of the work that the executive deliberates on when we meet. And I think that's entrusted to us by the people of the church. So it's important for folks to know that we take that work seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so the next question it's a question regarding our other institutions, theological schools, camps, colleges, retreat centers. All of these institutions have in the past informed the leadership of the church. And so the first question in this vein, there's a couple. What are the glimpses of new ways of being church? Or where are the glimpses of new ways of being church coming from? And who are the sources of insight into the church of the future?
So I would say one of the ways in which it's happened for us now is our work with the migrant communities. The migrant groups that we are working with who come from a variety of places, and we are experiencing the gift of seasoned Christian leaders from other parts of the world who are coming and wanting to partner with us in the ministry that God's calling us to do to reach into the Canadian community. They're teaching us something about the church of the future. And they are bringing and pushing us in terms of a vibrance and a dynamism that I think is helpful. The growth animators are networking with a number of other denominations, both here in Canada, the US, and reaching out to other parts where folks are wrestling and experimenting with ministries. In some ways, I don't think there's a blueprint for what the Church of the Future holds. We're in this place of experimenting and learning from our experimentation. And so I think that's the kind of ethos that we're creating in terms of with the growth animators. We're listening to folks in the church who are saying, I want to experiment this way. Certainly, I know that Pacific Mountain has had a kind of a more robust kind of experimentation with a variety of forms of new ministry. So there are these places in the system. And one of the gifts of the growth animators is that we can connect those places and learn together. As part of that, and I think I'm anticipating one of the other questions in the chat, is that leadership is critical, and we understand that leadership is critical. This past triennium, we experimented with the Regenerate program as a way of the program worked with 30 ministry personnel across the country. Each of them were required to do a capstone project, which they'll be sharing sometime in June. And that's both a kind of investing in leaders and also as they begin to imagine through their work what the church of the future is like. So connecting. We have good partnerships. The gift of the migrant communities, experiments that have happened, namely in Pacific Mountains. So all of those places are places that are helping us to shape that. In terms of leadership, if you don't mind, Jennifer Jansen Ball is the executive minister for ministry leadership, theology and ministry leadership. And I know there's some initiatives that some of the theological schools are engaged in around this question of leadership. And Jennifer, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot and asking if you may want to just contribute to this conversation a little bit.
Sure. Thank you, General Secretary. Can everyone hear me? I'm not sure if my mic is working. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Using different headphones. So a few things in terms of our theological schools. Of course, funding is always an issue for them. And so M&S dollars always help and are appreciated by both the schools and by the students at the schools. Currently, the theological schools, all 8 that we have, are working together to apply for a significant grant that would help us do some of these very things that people are naming in terms of leadership for what is emerging in new churches and providing opportunity and space to do more experimenting and to do some of the research as well as the formation for ministry leadership that is needed. Some of the schools are also applying, it's a similar grant. They're applying for 2 different kinds of grants so we're just waiting to see what will happen that way. The other piece is that the schools really have agreed to work collaboratively together. And so even if we're not successful in these grant applications, we will be working to address the needs of the church that is emerging and the kinds of leaders that we need. And I know from conversations that we've been having with the schools that the principals, deans, presidents, and faculty are all very aware of this and are committed really to continuing to serve the church in this way and to forming ministry leaders that we need for the church of the future.
Thanks, Jennifer. And the other thing I would just say is that the General Council 44, one of the proposal that was brought to General Council 44 was a proposal to allow for experimentation across the church as long as folks stayed within the bounds of the basis of union. And I think there have been some, and it was a proposal that allowed regional councils and communities of faith to do the experiment. And I think folks weren't quite sure what that meant, and there have been minor, but we're going back to General Council and asking them to extend that season of experimentation across the church. And I think now that folks have a clearer sense that in some ways you can't use yesterday's tools to solve the problems of the future. We have to imagine and into the future and develop the tools we need for the future. And so this season of experimentation will be continued. And in some ways, I think that's the attitude we want to keep cultivating in the church. Let's fail forward. Let's try things because there's no blueprint, as it were. We just have to keep experimenting until we and see what works.
What I hear you saying in your answer, Michael, is that you and the General Council and General Council Executive really recognize that leadership is so critical to the success of the church in the future. You can't have healthy communities of faith if you don't have healthy leaders, and you can't have a healthy denomination if you don't have healthy communities of faith. It's all so interconnected, and investing in leadership is such a critical piece of any strategic plan for going forward. So thanks for naming that. As you know, that's something really dear to my heart, and I'm just so excited to hear that that's a priority nationally. Arliss.
Thank you, Trina. A gift that the moderator gave to the church was her traveling roadshow on flourishing congregations, and I was able to participate in that. She and Cam Fraser, the director of growth and ministry development, had these workshops across the country, and I really appreciated a reframing around leadership and taking risks and finding, working on solutions within our congregations. And so she would say, and flourishing congregations say that we are transformed by each other, and gives us a new frame to work on some of the issues that are in front of us. So I don't know if anyone else who's on the cross country this evening was able to participate in that.
Any other executive member want to speak up at this topic? You have to raise your hand because I can't see you otherwise. So, Dave, Nancy, you have a question? Can you?
I don't have a question, but I was on at a flourishing event in Ottawa at Emmanuel United Church. But I'm part of the EOR Writing Relations group, and we were very involved with the remit. And then when we got together recently, we said, well, where do we go from here? And what we've decided to do, EOR puts out a newsletter twice a month. And what we decided to do is we do book reports on Indigenous authors. And so far we have 4 ready to go. I did one on an Indigenous child's book called Stolen Words, and which will be one of the books that they are going to be put in this newsletter. So we just thought that when people, that gives them a chance to, if they're interested, to go to their library and see if they can get the book out and learn more about Indigenous authors. So anyway, just wanted to
Thank you. Thank you. Paul, you want to speak?
I think one of the things we need to recognize is that the limiting factor is ourselves. To experiment requires that we are willing to do something different. And so often in the past 4 years, one of the things I've been hearing back is this is not United Church to do this. And really, if we think about it, some of the things we're holding on to as sacred cows may not be as sacred as we think they are. So when Michael says, for example, General Secretary says, fail forward, I think we need to take him very seriously. The church must not be the only institution that fears failure. Every other institution takes it as a point for growth. And I think we need to look at it in that way, that part of the experimentation, we may not get it right, but we're going to use this as a learning opportunity to move forward. And so imagine the possibilities, I think, is what we need to go forward saying. Just imagine the possibilities.
Thank you. So there's wondering if you have any examples of some of the experimentation that has happened, and comment about recognizing that there needs to be this opportunity to fail forward. How might that be financed, and has there been consideration given to centralizing compensation nationally to encourage innovation and at the same time promoting stability?
All good questions. So I think right now, I think some of the what's happening with a number of the migrant church communities is one of the examples of experimentation. We have situations where some of those communities are forming on their own. Some of those communities are in partnership with others. Just this past weekend, personally, I was in Sherbrooke, Quebec, and worshipped using Swahili, um, English, French, and folks from Madagascar. So it was just a wonderful kind of experience coming together. I'm going to invite my colleague Jennifer Henry. She may be able to offer some of that. The in terms of the question around resources, we are aware of that. We are in conversations. One of the ways we have to think seriously that yes, experimentation cost, and we have to find ways to reimagine how we fund our work together and how we find resources to do that. And that's part of what we're thinking about. The question of, with regards to compensation, the task group that was set up on total compensation, actually one of the recommendations it's making to the General Council is that General Council set up a working group to look at the question of centralized compensation. That may sound in some ways an easy task, but it has challenges. But the working group has made that as a recommendation to the General Council Executive that it sets up some further work on what the possibility of that. But Jennifer Henry, if you're online, I think you're online, if you want to speak to the question of some of the experimentations.
Yes, thank you, General Secretary. I think some of the migrant examples are good examples, and with as Michael said, the wisdom of seasoned Christian leaders who are offering us different ways forward. I think we've also are looking at the possibility of what it looks like for a campus to engage with a local congregation, and for there to be a partnership relationship that enhances both a campus ministry and a local community. There's a number of cooperative ministry pilots that we are supporting with supervised ministry sites. So those are offering us opportunities to learn about what cooperative ministry can look like, and to reflect that back to the rest of the church. And we're also having some conversation in some rural areas that these are early, but looking at a particular set of communities and saying, is there new ways that they might work together that have an enhanced possibility for resilience and strength, but just as vibrant participation as they had previously, maybe a different governance model, perhaps different strategic deployment of ministry personnel. So there's a number of different possibilities that we're pursuing, but we're also welcoming ideas for experimentation from people across the church as we try and move forward with taking some risks and learning.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I know that certainly regionally, there's lots of support for that.
Yeah, and I think in some ways the other piece that we haven't lifted up, Jennifer just Jennifer Jansball put something in the chat, is the work that's being done in some of the regions around First Third ministry as one of those spaces, both for experimentation, but also for nurturing leadership, or identifying and nurturing leadership. So that's an important piece of the work as well. Thank you.
Well, I do want to thank the members of the executive for being here, and Michael. It's been a really rich time, and I know it is a way that helps us to feel more knowledgeable and connected with the work of the wider church, and really appreciate the ability to engage in this way. So as we close our time together, I wanted to offer a little benediction, and so I'm going to invite Stephen to share the video.
In the midst of our struggle, dis-ease, and affliction, know that you are made in God's image, and God sees you as whole and good. May you celebrate God in your midst through opportunities of wholeness and justice. In the wholeness and goodness of God, go forth. Go and laugh with your friends. Reconcile with those who have hurt you. Be kind to strangers. And feel the divine smile upon us, now and forevermore.
So blessings to you on the rest of your evening. Thank you for being here. It's a gift to us to be able to engage with you in this way. And we will definitely follow up with questions in the chat later if there's anything there that didn't get responded to. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Thanks for the gift of your time.